Hey guys, this is Farron. Joined with me today is Bleach. Say hello, Bleach.
Hello.
And this is episode one of Worst Case Scenario. This is our brand new preparedness podcast that we are starting and rolling out here. And today I feel that one of the biggest topics in the prepping community we're going to do for episode one that is bugging in versus bugging out. Bleach, do you want to tell us what bugging out is?
Bugging out would essentially be the idea of leaving in that SHTF kind of scenario, leaving exactly where you're at in that moment, or even just branching out from where you'd typically be in day-to-day life.
Yeah, And for those of you that don't know, SHTF is a common term in the prepper community, meaning shit hit the fan. Basically, there's an active disaster that is currently happening. And then bugging out is often romanticized and is compared with bugging in. So, bugging in its core idea is staying at your home or your place of residence that you normally reside. So, that could be your house, your apartment, place of employment, just staying generally located to where you normally are. So, generally speaking, I will go and start with a statement. 99% of the time, you are better off bugging in.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
yeah. And we're going to go over why. Because I feel like bugging out is one of those things that's romanticized for the most part in the community. And I don't think it should be because bugging out has, it might be necessary, but it has its own host of challenges. So, the core idea of bugging in is the reason that it's so good is because you already have your shelter. That's where the majority of your supplies are going to be. Generally speaking, if you thought about it, you know how to defend that area, and you're also very familiar with the area. Like you could walk around in your house at night and not stub your toe because you know the layout of your house. That's huge.
Yeah, or even just the idea of like knowing the area you're around too, like as much as bugging in does kind of mostly incorporate where you're at in that moment or even just your house, your neighborhood kind of thing, knowing where everything's at around you immediately because of the common routes that you're taking daily is way more important than like, oh crap, let's just go across state lines and find some land.
Yeah, or like we're gonna go out into the woods and we're gonna go rough it and we're gonna survive. Yeah, okay, buddy.
It's like, yeah, until you get bit by a mosquito in the wrong spot and then all of a sudden your whole plan went to shit.
Yeah, or you get bit by a tick and then you're dying of yellow fever or whatever on the side of the trail.
Exactly. Like there's too much that goes into bugging out and like just 98, I would say 98, not 99, because there is a pretty good portion of things that could require you to leave, but 98% of your situations that you're going to come into contact with that would even be considered remotely SHTF are like it's just better to stay where you're at, especially if you have running water. Like please stick to where the water is. Water is the reason life exists. Try to be near some.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. For as far as buggy in goes, you're able to do many things buggy in versus bugging out. Uh, I don't know what everyone's individual living space looks like, but generally speaking, you can store more than you can carry.
Oh yeah.
And so you have access to those stored goods when you're bugging in versus if you're bugging out, you don't have access to those goods.
Yeah, a big point too that like I come across with a lot of people is like they try to get into the idea of like, oh well, if I have to leave, I'm gonna bring this amount of water and that amount of water. And it doesn't matter how long you're gone. At some point, there's gonna come a time where either you have to use water for something other than drinking it, and if you use too much of your water, or if you run out of water, and I mean, let's be honest, a good portion of people don't even know what an iodine tablet is, and you don't know how to purify water, how are you even going to get back? Like you've just screwed yourself. You're stuck in a situation now where you've got to improvise even the improvised plan.
Yeah, that's a good point. one of the things I have on my list also is you're burning far less calories. Calories are important. Calories is how you survive. You burn far less calories bugging in, having access to those resources versus if you bug out and you have to say hunt for your food. Even if it's small game, that can take a while or that can
Yeah.
take a good amount of calories to hunt small game versus, grabbing an MRE doesn't take very many calories.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, if you're going to be storing MREs and like I know a lot of companies now too, like they have that idea of like, oh, well, we're just going to sell this giant box of preservable food and like I mean, yeah, it's all great and all, but if you have to resort to that immediately, I do feel like you did something wrong. Honestly, as long as you can start a fire in some sense, like, even if you don't have power, you can cook the food that you already have. There is always, the idea of like the refrigerator doesn't work because of the power, but at that point, just know what you have on hand as well. Like if you only have stuff in your freezer, chances are you weren't prepared anyway. If you only have stuff that's like MREs and like preserved meals, you're still going to run out at some point. So being able to utilize what you can use right off rip instead of all of the things that you would use at a situation like that, especially if it's like an emergency and like you really need like, oh crap, I don't have any food except for my MREs. Like try to keep those stored away, try to keep that in stock. Try not to rely only on like the things you put in the bug out bag. Like I know a guy that he's really big on like, oh, like I buy MREs every week. I'm like, okay, but like, are you buying groceries? Like, if you're buying groceries, buy a little extra on the grocery side. Like, put a little bit extra into like the things that are going to give you a little more energy than some dried out food that not even our military really wants to eat. Like try to preserve as much of like the convenience as you can, because that's going to make you last a lot longer than most people in those situations.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Little story about me. Last 2 months we were overseas. Our DFAC shut down, and we were eating MREs for 2 months straight. And I gotta tell you, survival, absolutely you can. There's things to make that situation better, but you don't want to put yourself in that situation if you don't have to. You, as a consumer, as someone who is stocking their own food, has that freedom of choice where you don't have to sit and eat MREs for 6 months. Your poor colon.
Exactly. Yeah. I can only imagine. That sounds terrible to be honest with you, man. I mean, maybe I'm just spoiled by the American ways, but at the same time, man, convenience over anything else. If you can make your life more convenient, not saying to spend a bunch of money on convenience, but there's a lot of things
Right.
you can do that are cheap to give yourself that extra without having to spend a crap ton of money and also have to worry about your immediate emergency reserves.
Yeah, that's a good point. Generally speaking, you don't want to be spending a shitload of money. Like, big thing in the prepping community. This is really going to bug in and bug out, but they spend so much money on tools, yet they don't know how to use the tools properly.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you might have a $5,000 rifle setup and, the equivalent of a civilian IAR, but like if you don't have any food reserves,
You're gonna
you're a
die.
loot drop.
Yeah, pretty much your loot drop. And
Yeah. Say
then,
be well rounded.
yeah, be well rounded. The going over to a little bit of this podcast itself. The purpose of the podcast is that prepping is not a new thing. It's not a new idea. It's been getting more popular recently, but I feel like too many preparedness channels, too many preparedness videos are focused solely on like the sexy preps, like firearms and stuff like that. And so we're going to go more into the other side of preparedness, the more mundane stuff. But we'll talk about that more in another episode. So another thing that we talked a little bit, but more gear. You can stash more gear at your place of residence versus you can carry with you 9 times out of 10, unless you live in like a shoebox or something.
Yeah. If you live in a shoebox at that point, I think you're better off than most. I mean, you got the endurance up.
Yeah, you're already prepped. You're already ready to go.
Yeah.
You
Don't
can
mess
just
with
take
that
your
guy.
you can just take your cardboard box and move to another zip code. You're fine.
Yeah. Plus, if anything, I mean, I've really gotten into like the boring side of the prep recently and kind of like made it interesting to myself. just because you watch Instagram, you grew up watching like Doomsday Preppers, or you're watching any of like these gun tubers, and like they're like, oh, you got to have this and you got to have that, and it's always like the Gucci helmet or this chest rig that they're endorsed by the company that makes it or something like that. And meanwhile, it's like, go to your local army surplus store, and instead of looking at all the camo stuff, look at all the stuff that goes inside the camo stuff, because that's the most important stuff. Like
Yeah.
recently, especially, I've been focusing on like fuel, especially. I mean, we have this weird kind of halfway crisis in America going on right now, where it's like we never know if gas is gonna drop $1 or if it's gonna be $15 tomorrow for a gallon. And then also with the water, I mean, one of the biggest war tactics that's been used for millennium is damaging the water supply. Look at even states that have already damaged water supplies. Like those people, a lot of people are dying because of that, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it if you're already stuck in the situation. But as simple as like, even a personal experience, I went to the Army surplus store not that long ago. And I just was looking at the canteens, and then I was wondering, like, well, I mean, it's great to have canteens, but if I don't have anything to put in these canteens that I can drink, kind of screwed on that end. So I started just looking really deep into like, well, how does the military purify water? How have people purified water in general? How does general plumbing work? And just grabbing a couple like iodine tablets and a couple extra pipes that'll fit, whatever exactly you have going on in your house. Like I've just started stockpiling that because at the end of the day, like I keep referring back to this whole idea of like water and water storage. If you don't have water, or at least safe water to drink, I mean, I can tell you from personal experience of drinking not great water, it doesn't end too well. Or even I have a couple of buddies that are, currently still active in the military that have been through some situations where they didn't purify the water correctly, and you're out of the fight now, pretty much, or entirely for like the next week to 2 weeks. So the boring side is definitely, in my opinion, the more important side. And if you can make it entertaining to yourself, it will go way farther than like just going to the range and doing some, standing shooting drills.
Yeah. And I think that goes into this discussion because we look at bugging out as like the sexy option. It's the option romanticized. It's what people want to do. They want to, go live off the land, but it's not reality, especially if you're
Yeah.
going by yourself.
Yeah. It's like if
Well,
you're not already living off the land, it's going to be a lot more difficult to try and start when everything is already kind of going in that direction.
yeah, it's gonna be a brutal transition from, getting all your stuff at Kmart to now you don't have a Kmart. Now you got to survive. Now you got to deal with other people. Especially if you're not bugging out. If you're just bugging out to the middle of the woods, guess what? Other people are going to have the same idea. So you have that issue as well.
Yeah.
Versus, generally speaking, if you don't know someone, they're not going to bug out to your house. They
Yeah.
might stumble upon your house, but they're not going to bug out to your house.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to stop somebody from entering a space you're already in. I mean, look at any kind of CQB. If you've watched war footage at all, you can see that if you're the guy going into the house, chances are you're a lot more in over your head than the guy standing behind the corner you can't see. So just having the advantage of being already inside of the structure versus like, oh, I'm gonna go bug out in the woods and dig a trench. Like, okay, well now you're fighting the environment, possibly other people, and now you're on limited supplies.
Yeah, it's just it's something that I can kind of get, but I never really understood the fascination
Yeah, I
as
mean, as
far as
somebody
the
who
bugging
does
out.
live like in the sticks, like I live on a good portion of property, and it would honestly suck. Like it bugs me to think about like if I ever actually do have to leave where I'm at. I mean, I'm surrounded by woods. It's the Doomsday Preppers TV show dream of being like surrounded by heavily wooded areas, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like I would much rather sit inside and hook up a generator to the things that are most essential, have that gas, have that water, have that extra food, have emergency supplies on hand, even if I don't have lights in the house. That's a way better situation than having to worry about being out in the woods. And now I have no idea what's going to happen if I'm asleep versus if I'm asleep here, at least I can hear the door being, attempted to be unlocked or somebody in the neighborhood driving up or even just a flashlight being shined in the area because you're in a residential area, you do see that a lot easier than like somebody who's already in the woods trying to use light discipline not to be seen. Like you're minimalizing your risk just by bugging in. I mean, bugging out has its place, don't get me wrong. But it's not, we're just not going to be in ever in that situation where, you know, you're going to be the next John Wick and you're running through buildings, getting all this stuff done. Like that's how you die, especially as a civilian. If you don't have military support, chances are you're better off where you have what you can call support. So, I mean, like I said, I've thought about it. I've genuinely prepped even for that. I mean, you can't really ever call everything general purpose. There is going to be stuff that requires, niche gear, specific tools, specific etiquette, but make that your last resort if you possibly can. Not saying don't prep for it, definitely prep for it because if you got to go, you got to go. It's a couple of minutes before it's too late, but if you can turn what you already have into your fortress and understand it better than like the common man living in just a residential property, you're way better off. Like I'd even say if you have a fence around your yard, you're better off than most people, especially if you're already in the prepping mindset.
Yeah, those are really good points. And then, so I got some weaknesses for bugging in because everything has its weaknesses. Nothing can ever be
Of
foolproof.
course.
If it was foolproof, everyone would do it. And so, one of the problems with bugging in that you can circumvent by doing other stuff, but you cannot circumvent completely, is you are in a static position. If people know where you are, they know where you are. Versus bugging out, you're much more on the move unless you're staying in a centralized location, like say a cabin middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Bugging in, if like say you pissed off a group of people, now they know where you live. Eventually,
Yeah.
they find where you live, and if you're intending on bugging in, then you're staying there. So that's a weakness for it. And then another one is reliance on location. So it can be a little bit different. I like Bleach here. I live rural. I live in the woods. I'm on a well and a septic, all the jazz. And I look around, where I live, and there are certain things in my location that I would rely on. Like I live up the mountain a little bit from a river I could access and get water from. There are
Yeah.
streams I could access and get water from. But like Bleach brought up earlier, if the water supply is contaminated to where I can no longer use that river, no longer use those streams or anything like that, that might incline me to move because at the end of the day, your stored water is going to run out.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
depending on the type of well you're on, you might not be able to have a well that has hand cranks like they do in the movies. It
Yeah.
depends on
Or even just the idea of like, do you know how to operate your system of water, even if you are in a rural area? Like, do you know how your well operates? Do you know what it's connected to? Are you even anywhere close to calling yourself like, able to complete a plumbing task? Because these are things that can and will fail, especially if they don't have maintenance. So, as much as, we're talking about flaws, um, as much as there's flaws in everything, make sure that you know how to accomplish something as far as those flaws go. Make sure that you know how to work on those things and maintain those things if you do have them.
Yeah, exactly. If you have a well, great, but if it goes down, you don't want to be screwed. Or if you have a
Exactly.
problem with your septic system or things along those lines. And then
So don't even get me
probably
started on the septic system.
yeah, septic. I fucking septic system. I like being on a septic, but it has its quirks. Let's just say that.
Oh, especially in a high stress situation, man. If that's one of your biggest problems, especially in like that bug in scenario, oh boy, good luck to you.
Yeah, no one wants to deal with sanitation. Sanitation sucks. It's one of the
Oh yeah.
most unfun things to deal with, especially if disease is involved.
Oh yeah.
Then it gets terrible. Go outside, dig a slit trench, you'll be fine. And dig yourself an outhouse. And then probably the biggest thing you're gonna face that depending on the shit hit the fan type, how large it is, you're not gonna have access to those utilities. So, speaking from where I'm at, I live in the great state of Alaska. As many of you know, great state of Alaska gets fucking cold. And so I am on a natural gas heater in my house. I do not have a wood fireplace. So the problem with that is if my electricity goes down, which it has, I do not have access to heating. And then also, electricity is how I pump my water. So I lose access to electricity. I lose access to my water as well. And if you look at, terror attacks and things like that, one of the biggest things they target besides water supplies is grid infrastructure when it comes to the
Mm.
electrical grid. And so if you are in a place where you have now I can get around those. Like if I can't flush the toilets, fine. I'll go outside and dig an outhouse. That's not that big of a deal. Some places though you can't do that. Or I might, I have a camp stove. If we're like freezing to death, I can always dig a hole. I can always cut a hole in the ceiling and put the camp stove in, put some flame retardant stuff underneath and heat one room of the house so you don't freeze to death. But that might not be an option for everyone. And so I could definitely understand more bugging out if you're in an apartment high rise, that is one of the worst places to be. Just for
If
example.
you're in apartments, general, like if you're in a situation, anything close to, SHTF, I mean, apart from like your standard like martial law curfews and stuff like that, but any kind of like civil unrest, natural disaster, like anything that's going to cause you to even attempt at doing one of the bug in or bug out methods and you're in an apartment, get out of there. Get out of any situation where you're in an overcrowded space. You have now become like key resources, or at least the idea of key resources, regardless of what you have, to everyone else in that building.
Yeah, generally speaking, if you're in an apartment, it's only a matter of time before someone's going to come breaking down your door. Either that
Hmm.
or you're going to have not enough supplies on hand and you're going to expire yourself. Unless you're
Yeah.
like
And
the super guru apartment prepper, but I don't think that's most everyone.
I mean, if you own the apartment complex, or if you own like a condo, or even like a set of townhouses or something like that, and you're just a big baller, and I'm sure if you're prepping, you have way better stuff than I do. Um, Maybe it's not a bad idea to bug out and go to that place as well. But if you're living in that situation, paying rent, you might want to get out of there. Try not to be the movie looter and do all of that, but also try not to be the victim of that either, because a lot of people who have any idea what they're gonna do in that situation, sadly, as I call it, because I don't think it's a good thing, but sadly, a lot of people are going to try to loot, going to try to take what you have, going to try to get to whatever you consider your stash. So if you can get out before the getting's good, I would definitely do so.
Yeah, general rule of thumb is if you live in a populated area, you have 24 to 48 hours before everyone and their mother is trying to get out and highways are going to get blocked.
Yep.
That's just generally speaking.
Oh yeah. And don't be the guy that waits for rescue by all means, because
Yeah.
we've kind of already seen how that went. Maybe not as far as like I keep saying the movies go, but we've seen in multiple states, even in the last decade, places that have just gotten really bad, whether it be floods or whether it be mudslides or fires, etc. And people just try to sit there and wait for help, and those are the people you see on the long list of names on the news.
Yep. Pretty much. So it's a balancing act between the two things. You gotta know when to stay and know when to leave.
Oh yeah.
And so now we're gonna go to bugging out, which is the hot topic for today. Because generally speaking, if you talk to most preppers, they know bugging in is like the gonna help you 98% of the time. But now bugging out. So bugging out is, as we said, leaving your residence and you are trading security for mobility. The problem with bugging out is every single thing becomes harder when you are bugging out. What do I mean by that? It is harder to acquire and maintain food, water, sleep, and your own safety. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, the best thing I would ever recommend to anybody planning on bugging out is just being low profile. Don't try to be, you know, kitted out in all camos and wearing your rifle out in public and stuff like that. I mean, like you're definitely probably going to look cool for a second, but if we've learned anything from any situation where anyone's ever had a gun in a bad like public unrest or civil unrest situation, they get swarmed, man. Like I just had this conversation the other day actually about to bring it up with the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Not going to go into the politics of it, but we saw what happened. Somebody with a rifle, whether they were there for a good thing or a bad thing, they had a gun. Everybody can see that gun. It's pretty obvious what he has in his hands. Immediately before shots were even fired, he was being approached. Whether or not he was swarmed before or after the gunshot, I'm also not going to get into because I know there's a bunch of controversy over that. But don't be the guy who looks like he has a gun. EDC stuff, as much as it is a fad, and a lot of people are like, oh, get this crossbody bag and get this holster and this sidecar and all of that. Don't look like you have it. It's not a good idea. In an everyday scenario, if you're not planning on having your gun on your hip, even more so, do not have it on your hip in that situation. I've seen a lot of like, especially working in the area that I work, being a very, low income, more on the ghetto side. Even in everyday life, people who look like they have a weapon immediately become a target for somebody else who nobody knows whether or not they have a weapon. And I've seen it go either way. Um, I will touch on medical also. I'm not going to get too far into that because, obviously later on the line, it's going to become a little bit more of a topic. But if you're leaving your house at all in everyday life, I just recommend carrying medical. In a bugging out situation, especially urban, I would recommend carrying medical. There is a barrage of companies that offer low profile medical setups or even something that you can fill with your own contents and keep in your waistband or keep in a backpack or even just like myself, I keep a tourniquet in my pocket. I got one of those little short tourniquets from North American Rescue and it goes everywhere with me. If you're using your car, you should have, I don't see an excuse not to have a full size trauma kit or at least some kind of bleeding control in the car. Um, in that type of situation, whether you have a gun or not, or if somebody else has a gun, or even just you fall in the wrong area or you or just you're in a bad situation already if it's you're bugging out, you should have medical. Focus on medical before you focus on even zeroing your rifle, I would say, just because chances are you're going to be the guy that gets hit before you're going to be the guy that pulls the shot off. um, if you think that you're Chris Kyle, that's awesome. I'm so happy for you that you're that good of a shot. But if somebody sees you before you see them, you're going to need a tourniquet more than you're going to need your gun.
Yeah, those are very good points. I could speak a little bit to the medical aspect. So I've been in medicine for 10 years, prior medic in the army, and I can tell you that there is when you're in the bugging out, when you're in the field, when you're on the X, whatever you want to call it, there's only so much medical care you can do because the way the military works is you get the casualty, you put a tourniquet on, whatever, get them off the X, you stabilize them, and then you send them to that roll one, roll two, so on and so forth to get treatment. You do not have that when it comes to an SHTF scenario, or you might have that in a very, very limited aspect. So, something very simple that they could treat could kill you if you are in a bugging out scenario. So let's
Hmm.
say, for example, you're bugging out, you're rolling along, and you break your ankle. Now what do you fucking do?
Yeah.
Versus if you're inside, you're in your home, you still have access to all the supplies versus just having access to the supplies in your backpack. So it can be very something simple that can doom you in that bugging out scenario. So there's a lot more risk associated with it. Now, granted, we're also not saying that bugging out is terrible, it's the devil, whatever, whatever. It is necessary in some instances, and we'll go over that a little bit later. But just know that when you bug out, every single thing is going to become harder for you moving forward. So,
Yeah, I would honestly even touch on the aspect of like rolling your ankle because it's a very real thing. Like, especially in a high stakes scenario, like you're trying to get somewhere as fast as you can. you're not looking at the floor counting your steps, you know, like you're not jogging on the side of the road just to, get to your goal weight. Like you are moving at a pace that you have never moved before in most people's cases, or even just at a pace where you are risking significant injury, and trying to avoid those significant injuries can also kind of make you forget about like the rolling your ankle or spraining your ankle or even just falling and bruising something that causes you to have a lack in mobility. Like there's a lot that can go wrong. Now, like you said, there's not that massive medical backing. You can't just go to a hospital in those kinds of situations. I mean, you can, but good luck. Um, but I don't want nobody to take that as like don't carry anything, because I'm not saying be a doctor, but know how to stop a bleed, know how to set up a splint, and please, by all means, know when to use a tourniquet, because I feel like a lot of people carry them and have no idea when and where you can actually use them. Um, I'm not saying everybody needs to go take their security courses and first aid courses and everything, but ain't a bad idea.
Yeah, you ask them the difference between a hasty and deliberate, and they look at you with wide eyes like you're crazy.
Dude, I had somebody ask me what a hemostat was the other day, and I'm like, you have piercings.
Really?
Like you have like this is a person that has piercings in places that, I mean, I don't think I'd ever get piercings, but irregardless, like how are you even taking them out without a hemostat? You just reaching in there? Like you got that small of fingers? Like even splinters, man. You get a big enough splinter, I mean, if you get a little splinter, honestly, be a man. But you get a big enough splinter where it's kind of dragging on you. You might want to consider getting some hemostats and pulling that thing out. And that also goes for whether that be a gunshot wound on the extreme end, or even just like shrapnel from something, whether it be blowing up, or just even if you're on the side of the road and a car skids past you and shoots a rock and it hits you anywhere, make sure that rock's not embedded in you. And if you're not willing to pull it out with your fingers, and you don't have any tools to pull it out otherwise, well, it's stuck in there.
It lives with you now.
Yeah.
It's a part of you.
Yeah. Let's say they're always cool scars until the hospitals aren't accessible.
Yeah, their scars a story until it limits your mobility. Then you can't do anything, or your eyesight, or
Exactly.
anything like that. So we've been talking a bit here about bugging out, how how not great it can be compared to bugging in. There's definitely advantages. We do see bugging out quite a bit, just on a different scale in America and across the world. Like with refugees, they've had to bug out. They've had to leave their home because of violence or disease or whatever have you, and we can see examples of that in the states, like with hurricanes, like in Florida.
Yeah.
People generally aren't going to stay with their supplies if there's a fucking hurricane on top of them. And so, but generally speaking, when you have people in that instance, maybe not someone who's like a refugee, but someone who's experienced like tornadoes or hurricanes, they already have a set route, they have a set plan, they have set, like, oh, we're going to have supplies here, we know where to meet, so on and so forth. They have a plan associated with their bugging out. They're not just fucking off into the woods.
Yeah. That's a big thing here, especially, I mean, being a Floridian. I mean, we have hurricanes that, I mean, everybody's used to them. Nobody freaks out, but I mean, it'll take your house out if you're in the wrong place. But if you don't have the news to tell you, like, hey, you're zone A and you need to evacuate at this specific time, what are you gonna do? It's one of those things of not everything is gonna be announced. Um, Bugging out is usually a you didn't get the announcement kind of idea. It's not, I wouldn't consider it the same as like the news announcing that you need to relocate right away, because then you kind of have time to like pack everything that you wouldn't normally be carrying into your car, and you have, accessibility to like the roads and highways and stuff like that. But in the extreme cases, like especially was it last year before, we had hurricanes bad enough to where they were telling people, if you don't evacuate at a certain time, we're not going to come help you. And there were a lot of people that didn't leave. There were a lot of people that hunkered down and tried to see what they could do. And I mean, yes, some of them lost their houses and some of them made it out. But at the end of the day, if these people would have had like an actual plan and an actual like idea of what was going on and how to address that by prepping for it, I wouldn't say daily, but at least dedicate a certain portion of like your time to figuring stuff like that out before it happens, before it ever becomes a threat or a conversation. Um, it's just a big risk to stay where you're at in a situation where you already know that your area is compromised, but it's even bigger risk if you have no idea it's coming. So understanding what's necessary to leave with is a massive portion of it, even if you don't have all of the Gucci supplies.
Yeah, and there are definite advantages to bugging out. We talked about the hurricanes. You can escape immediate danger. At the end of the day, there's no point in dying over your house because if you die, then it's no longer your house. Something like that. And then it allows you to relocate to avoid densely populated areas. Now, it's a general rule of thumb, and it's a right rule of thumb in the prepping community. The more people you have, the more problems you have, especially with people that you are not associated with and that you do not know. And so you want to remove yourself from those densely populated areas, like the apartment we talked about. You want to get out of
Yeah.
there. You want to leave because at the end of the day, they might be your neighbor, but they might be kicking down your door for food 3 days later. So that allows you to avoid those densely populated areas, and then you also have your regroup strategy. Now, I will say this now, and we'll go over it in some other episodes and stuff, but lone wolfing is your worst case scenario when it comes to SHTF.
Oh
You
yeah.
want to have a group. You want to have people you can trust, you can rely on, people that, you can die for, and they would do the same for you. And so that allows you to regroup with others versus where you live, it might be much harder for people to regroup with you. So, like, all my family lives down in Washington. I'm not going to say, hey, if shit goes down, meet at my house because they have to get, across Canada to get up here. And so you allow yourself that flexibility of having a meetup location, meetup routes, but also, again, that goes into planning, not just fucking off into the woods. And if
Yeah,
you
and
are,
a lot of people do focus on like that whole gear aspect and supplies aspect way more than they focus on people. And I can tell you, I would much rather have a set of hands than a spare rifle, you know? Um, go to your local ranges, talk to people, chat it up, talk about politics, talk about whatever to start the conversation going. And if you feel like that's an asset, invite them to start something. Be a part of a group. If you're not a part of some kind of like even small organization, the risks outweigh the rewards of leaving or bugging in. Like I genuinely think that people are the biggest asset and the biggest resource in any of the prepping community's ideas of what could happen.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Humans throughout our entire history generally have survived and built together because as a person, you're not going to be able to know every skill. You're not going to be competent in every single skill that exists. So if you have someone that's say, I'm not an engineer versus I would like be with someone that's an engineer so that way they could take those skills to, wherever you're at or whatever you're doing and they can help you. Not only that, it's more people to rely on because going back to the broken ankle, if you're by yourself in the woods, you have a broken ankle, no one's going to help you. Versus if you're, say, in the woods with maybe, I don't know, let's say 3 people, they can help you, they can help carry your supplies. You could still reach your destination and not just sit there and be like, well, I'm fucked. Now what do I do? So,
Yeah, you don't want
relying,
to be the guy by yourself in the woods with a broken ankle.
yeah, no. Yeah,
Yeah,
up here,
unless, I mean, if you fetishize it, I guess, and you're one of those guys that wants to find a cool bleed out spot, that's a quick way to do it. But I
yeah,
just
you
wouldn't
just,
recommend being alone in general. Even bugging in, like, get good with your neighbors, you know, even if they're not like your most tactically proficient people, or they don't have guns, or they don't have a bunch of camo gear stashed in a closet somewhere, like I know a good portion of us do. An extra set of hands. Even if you guys both don't know how to fix something, I'm sure the two brains trying to figure it out is a lot easier than one person under a lot of stress trying to figure it out on their own.
yeah, and another aspect, we're getting a little bit away from bugging it out, but another aspect is the social aspect. Generally speaking, no one wants to be by themselves, especially when they're in a stressful scenario. Some people do for a limited time, but you want to have that help. You want to have those people to rely on if you get, say, too stressed out, too angry, too whatever to do something. Or if you have to make a super important decision, you can have other people help you make that decision and you're not just on your own.
Yeah. A big part of it too is like understanding your role. Like if you're bugging out, especially, I mean, obviously you should have a group, but if you have a group and you're bugging out, um, knowing your role and what your position is more important than like everybody trying to be the leader. Everybody trying to like, oh well, this is where I shine. Like even if you're just a guy who's got a basic AR-15 with a just iron sights and a flashlight, you still have a role. You are still going to be needed at some point, and you could be the difference in between actually getting to your destination and everybody being just another name on a list. I know, especially with the group that I'm a part of, like we train together and stuff like that, but we make it a point to where understanding your role is more important than being the best shooter, being good at the bushcraft, being good at, these specific like tactical skills and these specific like preparedness skills that everybody like glorifies and everybody wants to have. If your position is just to stand there and keep your eyes on a specific area, that's a really important role. It's boring. It might suck, especially in the situation you're in, but that could be the difference in between not seeing something that's important for everybody to see that could cost everybody else their life, or nothing happens and you were able to either take that shot or apprehend somebody, or even just if it be an animal or something, stop the destruction that could possibly happen to it, like the exact plan that you guys have. Um, we focus a lot on like that idea of bugging in, obviously, but in the idea of bugging out, um, the idea of actually being all in the same place is a little far-fetched immediately. We talked previously about that first 24 and 48 hours. Um, know your role for that time period, especially know where you're supposed to be at, know where you're supposed to be able to go. Understand that if that gets compromised, you should have plan B, C, D, E, F, you know what I'm saying? Like it's very, very important in the long run to understand not just your capabilities, but what exactly your role is on a team if you're on a team.
Yeah, and that's a very good point there, and having those defined roles, and that people will shine as a leader, but not everyone's meant to be a leader, especially in very stressful situations. So you
Yeah.
don't want the guy who's a bumbling idiot that panics to be the leader of the group, and so on and so
Yeah, but
forth.
he also might be big and strong and able to carry all, the biggest rucksack that carries majority of the ammo and food. So he's still a pretty
Absolutely.
important guy.
Yeah, he just might not be the leader, and that's okay. Not everyone has to be the leader in every instance, and that's fine.
Yeah. I can tell you I don't want to be. Like I genuinely, I don't want to say I'm a pretty good follower, but in that situation, I would much rather follow somebody else's orders who's able to keep a lot clearer of a head in that situation and give decent orders and give orders that are going to actually push towards progression to something than me be in that spot and oh crap, I don't know as much as this guy does. Now I'm leading us into a death trap, or I'm leading us to a place where there isn't water, where there isn't any kind of safeguard at all. Like I see a lot of guys that try to be like, like, oh, I'm training the same way the Army Rangers do. And I'm like, what if you're not the Army Ranger equivalent on your team? What if you're just the guy that knows how to purify water? What if you're just the guy that used to be a mechanic, so you're way better hands-on with vehicles or any kind of thing that might need some tinkering on? Like, use your strengths and recognize that your strengths are going to determine your role, but most importantly, stick to your freaking role. Because we've even had plenty of situations where somebody like gets out of line in a specific situation and they're like, "Oh, I got it," and I'm like, "Okay, but it wasn't your job to get it. Now you've just compromised everybody else because you stepped out of line." Like that preparedness doesn't just come with watching YouTube videos and being able to replicate the Doomsday Prepper TV show, like understanding that even the Doomsday Prepper TV show guys had their daughters doing specific roles, and if they stepped out of line, they got screamed at, which used to be kind of funny, but that can cost you your life in the wrong situation.
Yeah, Doomsday Preppers. What a show. What a show. We little side note here, me and my fiance binge watched that on Netflix because they were all available on Netflix, and it was it's a pretty good time to
Yeah.
see what other people. Now we'll talk about this in another episode. There is a difference between it being a prepper and being a doomsday prepper, but we won't get into that here.
Yeah, we'll say, you could prep for Armageddon, but good luck.
Yeah. My favorite saying since I've started my journey with this is don't prep for doomsday, prep for Tuesday.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
And that's what I try to live my life by and philosophy by. So, the common mistakes people make. We've talked about this a little bit now, but no plan beyond head out to the woods. Yeah, that ain't gonna work out good for you. You're not more than likely you're not this super gung ho survivalist type that can go survive in a cabin alone for 30 years. More than
Yeah.
likely, you're not that guy.
You also
Eh,
don't have a helicopter coming to extract you from where you're at, you know?
exactly.
Like,
You're not Bear Grylls where, you get upset, then you go eat pizza in a hotel kind of thing.
well,
That's
didn't
not gonna
he?
happen.
He was drinking his own piss though, which
He did drink his own. I think he did it twice. And I'm not shitting on Bear Grylls, guy's prior SAS, he's a badass.
we
But
are
all
shitting on drinking your own piss though. Don't do that.
yeah,
Purify with some water.
don't drink
Buy
your own
some
piss.
iodine tablets. Buy some iodine remover. You're good.
Technically, when it comes to the salinity of the urine, you can drink it the first time. Don't drink it after the first time. You will destroy your kidneys and you will just overflow yourself with salt and sediment. But the
Yeah.
first time, if you have nothing else, drink your own piss. Go for it.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
if that's your first resort, then
yeah. Then you
so
then you
you're
have
not too much of a prepper if you just plan on going to the woods and drinking your own piss. But
yeah.
hell yeah, man.
That's the only strategy I have. What do you mean? And
I'm
I'm gonna
scared of that guy.
yeah. He just has a straw at the end of the slit
Yeah.
trench, ready to go.
Yeah. He's like, I got my life straw off Amazon, dude. I can drink it.
Yeah, dude, I can drink your urine. I can drink everyone's urine. Anyway, so some more mistakes people make that are not super obvious. No fuel strategy. A lot of people want to bug out by vehicle, and that could be very difficult because you have a bunch of considerations like, do you have enough fuel? Can you carry enough fuel to get there? Fuel's fucking heavy, just like water.
Yeah.
And what do you plan on doing with the vehicle once you get there? Are you going to ditch it, burn it? Or are you going to continue to use it? If you're going to continue to use it, that's super convenient. But generally speaking, fuel, from my understanding, only lasts around 3 months, like just stagnant, unless you add like preservatives and stuff to it.
Yeah. I
And
mean, you've got about 3 to 6 months if you're good at preserving fuel. Um, the guys who are like, oh, well, this fuel can I've had in my shed for a year, I'm going to put that in my car. Oh, congrats, you don't have a car. Um, even with the thing that's going around right now where they're saying like, oh, well, even though E15 is not supposed to be used in the summer, we're going to allow fuel companies to put E15 into their machines and you're going to be pumping E15 into your car. It's not quite bug out or bug in situations yet, but not understanding what that is, because I don't know how many people I've talked to about it, and they're like, "What's E15? What's E15?" And I'm like, "It's more ethanol in the gas. If you have an older engine, or even if you're planning on putting it in your lawnmower, you've just screwed yourself." Um, in
yeah,
that kind of situation, if this is going to be, because I know a lot of us, I don't know how many people I've seen be like, "Oh, it's coming soon, the big boogaloo," They want everything to happen super, super quick. I'm like, well, if you're planning on using your vehicle and they just talked about, giving all us E15 gas, you're doing something wrong. I wouldn't risk it.
yeah, and that right there, case in point, goes into why you surround yourself and you talk to other people. I didn't know shit about that before you talked about it. I didn't know what E15 was. I know
Yeah.
unleaded
So,
gas, and that's about it. So
yeah, just a short note for anybody who is going to listen, and also you if you don't know about it. The more ethanol that's in your gas, the less gas it is. Um, If you have an older engine, they're not meant to take that. Even E10 gas, which is pretty common, like it's like your reg, still has issues with older cars. That's why you see a lot of antique cars. People aren't filling it up with your run-of-the-mill cheaper gas. People are using that premium stuff for a reason. If you drive a car where you're already used to using premium gas and you're in a situation where you're deciding to bug out, you might want to leave your car behind. Um, if you're uneducated on the side of gasoline in general, preserving gasoline, what goes into making gasoline, or even what gasoline is in the pump at your local gas station, I would ditch the vehicle. I would learn how to use a map instead, because your GPS is also going to be very limited. Whether or not you have Wi-Fi could determine that. If you're lucky enough to have some kind of satellite device that's able to pull GPS, or if you're good enough at ATAC, awesome. If you're not, because a lot of us have jobs and don't have the resources to obtain the idea of using ATAC as a go-to option, learn how to read a map, go to your local library. You can take pictures of one. You can go to your local truck stop. You can go to your local um, info center. If you're traveling out of state, they're all over the interstate. And you can grab maps for these local areas. You can go to Bass Pro Shop and get them for like $2. Buy maps, understand how to move on foot. It's not the same as moving in a vehicle. And if you're already limited to how you can use your vehicle, I would ditch it. It's just dead weight.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's to think, is it worth keeping that vehicle when it's going to be unusable in 3 to 6 months because you don't have any fuel for it? Or,
Yeah,
God forbid, something else goes wrong on the vehicle and you don't have replacement parts for it.
exactly.
You
Or
know,
don't know how to fix it on the fly. If you're not a mechanic, it doesn't matter how, if you have the entire AutoZone in your back seat, if you don't know how to install it, or you're in a situation where it's not a good idea to be sitting there outside of your car working on it, you've screwed yourself.
yeah. And so, definitely having a strategy for vehicles, especially bugging out, is very important. If you're bugging in, if you have vehicles and they just, sit in the yard, I guess that's fine. But bugging out, especially, that people see a vehicle, that's a security risk to you. They can also hear a vehicle, they could smell a vehicle as well when
Yeah,
they won't be able to hear you or smell you or perceive you nearly as much as they would, a fucking Ford F-150 barreling down the highway when there's no other vehicles on the road. That's going to
yeah.
get people to notice you. And
Plus,
then,
especially in areas that are heavily affected, that's shelter to some people. You are literally riding around in something that somebody else doesn't have and somebody else may need. You're making yourself more of a target all the way around.
yeah. And then this is a big one: overpacking unrealistic gear setups. I have done a ton of rucking in my life, and I can tell you, ounces equal pounds, pounds equal pain is a very, very real thing. If you overpack when you go to bug out, now if you have a vehicle, that's one of the advantages of a vehicle. You can pack more shit, and you're not physically carrying it. But let's say you're on foot, you are not going to be a useful individual if you're carrying so much weight that you cannot move, you cannot communicate, you're fucking dying, you can't aim straight. And
Yeah,
overpacking is nice because you have all this stuff, but at the end of the day, how much stuff are you going to use?
yeah,
Because
exactly.
generally speaking, when it comes to people more often overpack than they do underpack. They got too much shit.
Which, to be honest, I mean, that's kind of where SOPs come in my opinion. I mean, everybody thinks it's just a military or law enforcement thing. Um, Write down your own SOP for what you need in a situation, and then go down that list and make sure that there's not an alternative that you already have packed, or there's not some way to create that alternative with something you already have packed. Having it all written down makes it a lot easier, especially for inventory of the items you have and configuring the orientation of your gear. I know I've struggled in the past a lot with like getting like when I was early getting into like the whole prepping scene. I wanted to have, you know, this, that, and the third different coat and pants and all that in the bag on top of all of these different tools, on top of all this food and all this water. And then one, your pack isn't going to close, and two, you try carrying it around. Good luck. It's not going to work. You already don't want to fight with a backpack on unless it's a pretty small backpack, hence the idea of back panels and stuff like that, which aren't really even for you. It's for team gear, which is already minimal. But even going back to what you said of like a car can carry more stuff, if you're not willing to walk with it, I wouldn't even bring it in the car. Throw your bag in the back seat. Yeah, cool. Drop the weight while you're riding in the car. But if you're not willing to get out the car and run around with it, I just wouldn't even have it.
Yeah, I think that depends on, where you're bugging out to. Say you're bugging out a cabin, you got to haul a generator. We're not talking about those super niche things. We're talking about, if you drive somewhere, then you have to leave your vehicle and go on foot. Don't leave a ton of shit in your vehicle. It's
Yeah,
just, you're just going to give that to someone else. It might be
yeah.
cool, but at the end of the day, you can't carry 10 rifles. Sorry. No one's fucking doing that.
I mean, don't say no one. I know a couple of people that do plan on just walking around with a duffel bag full of guns.
Yeah, well,
Um,
this isn't Zombieland. It's not going to work out too well.
yeah. I was gonna say best of luck to you. Not even Rick Grimes could complete that one. That ended up becoming a problem for him. I don't know if you've watched The Walking Dead. That was
Oh yeah,
hilarious, him losing
yeah.
the bag. But duffel bag full of guns is not the way to go. Two guns, in my opinion, three at the max. If you're in a regular everyday, I call it the fad kit, plate carrying a belt, you're gonna have a rifle and a handgun on you. At the max, you should have another handgun in your bag. That's the most you should carry, in my opinion. Carry ammo. If your
Oh
gun's
yeah,
not up to run for the amount of ammo you have the wrong gun.
yeah. Don't carry. Invest in your equipment,
Yeah,
but also know your limitations. If you've never shot before, you don't need a Knight's Armament SR-25 or something crazy like that. Build up to what your skill can afford, basically.
yeah.
Like if you've never trained with night vision, you don't have a night vision device, you probably don't need a PEC 15, something like that. And then going into that a little bit, we talked about it, but thinking gear equals skill. This is a big one because people think, you buy gear, you automatically know how to use that gear. And that's a really big problem for people because they hoard all this gear and then they don't know how to use it. Skills,
Yeah.
99% of the time, are going to be much more useful than the gear because skills teach you how to circumvent around the gear. Like, let's say water collection, for example. Water collection I'm using as a very straightforward example, but a lot of people have handheld water pumps like you'd have for a fish tank that helps you collect water. Well, if that thing gets gunked up or broken, you still need the water. So you
Yeah.
have the skills to circumvent that. Be like, oh, I can take it in a bucket, purify it later. I can use a charcoal purifier, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So gear does not equal skill in the sense that this is a super big problem that I talk to people when it comes to medical items. People carry medical items they have no idea how to fucking use. And I think the biggest problem child is the needle chest decompression. I cannot tell you how many people have asked about buying them or have bought them that have no idea how to use a needle chest decompression. And needle chest decompression, for those of you that don't know, it's this big ass needle that you put in through the ribs, through the third intercostal space or the fifth intercostal space to relieve tension pneumothorax, which you can get from a variety of things: blunt force trauma, gunshot wounds, so on and so forth. But you have a risk of you can puncture the cardiac box where if you do not place the NCD correctly, and that can kill someone.
Yep.
And so I always tell people unless you know how to use it or you have someone in your group that knows how to use it, do not carry it
Which, to be
because
honest, if you have somebody in your group that knows how to use it, they should be carrying it.
yeah, they should be carrying it. I understand cross loading. I did cross loading in the army. I would have, sergeants carry NCDs, cry kits, stuff like that. But I also
Yeah.
knew that if we push comes to shove and we panicked, they would not be cutting someone's throat open trying to put a cry in them.
Yeah.
Just an example. So that's the big irk I have when it comes to specifically medical items. Don't carry it unless you know how to use it. Don't
Let's touch on that
carry.
too. Like, I have a pretty loaded IFAK. I wouldn't even call it an IFAK at this point. Like, it is a trauma kit, but I also don't have items that a lot of people do have in theirs because I don't know how to use it. I have alternatives to items that, are pretty much used in the same way that items that you're going to get in your standard IFAC that I know how to use in adverse situations, but I don't have anything like that. I don't have anything where I'm going to be puncturing anybody. I'm not going to go perform a field tracheotomy in the middle of a gunfight because I don't know how to do that. Like I'm not going to try to become the next doctor in the middle of a firefight or even outside the firefight because I'm going to kill somebody if I try. So my main objective is to stay within my role. For context, I do typically resort to like that ammo bearing, assistant gunner, keeping somebody else's gun up. And then in a non tense scenario, I'm the armorer, because I do have a pretty weird brain that is able to categorize all those things. And once I've taken it apart, I can fix it. That doesn't apply to anatomy. I don't know how to fix you unless it's just a bleeding problem, or if you're choking, I can do the Heimlich. Um, but also as far as overpacking, and I feel like a really, really overlooked portion of that comes with rifle management. Um, Everybody wants a SOP mod rifle. I get it. It's cool. Everybody wants to have this super cool tactical, like Call of Duty looking rifle with the, you know, LPVO and the piggyback red dot, and you've got your PEC 15 on the front, and God knows what else you're putting on your rifle with all these cords hanging everywhere and etc. But your simple rifle is going to get you a lot farther than like the same rifle that somebody was using overseas, because you're not overseas and you don't have the support of everybody, and you didn't get training on all of that information or all of those items that you have on your rifle. I don't know how many times I've had people come to me and show me their rifle, and it's like 15 pounds, but they're not hitting, not like sub 3-inch groups at 100 yards. Or they've got this giant LPVO, but they're not shooting past 100 yards. Or even just a laser. Why do you have a laser on your gun? Like, I understand if you're planning on breaching buildings or if you're mainly fighting on like the inside of some kind of structure. Yeah, laser's gonna make sense there because it's a little bit quicker to up the laser and have your beam on something to some people than it is to try to get that sight picture with whatever optic you have on your gun, especially if it's a magnified optic. Um, that being said, and I mean, I will also say I had that issue for a while myself of like, oh, well, they have it and they seem like they know what they're doing, so I'm gonna replicate it. Don't do that. You're not helping yourself or anyone else. Know specifically what you're gonna do with your rifle. Know how far you plan on shooting with your rifle, because that also determines your zero, which I'll touch on later. But for me, myself, I come from having everything I could possibly think of putting on the rifle and not being able to really lug it around without being excruciatingly fatigued, to now I just have a red dot, a flashlight, a vertical grip, and irons. Like, minimalize your weight as much as possible, especially if you plan on moving around. And also just go simple first. If you're shooting constantly and you've got your zero down and you've got your distances down and you know your holds, and you have all of this knowledge already on what you're capable of, and you consider yourself an expert with your gun, and you feel like, oh, well, I have this scenario that I feel like I could improve on a little bit with this piece of tech, then by all means add it. But like you were even saying, if you don't have night vision, chances are you don't need a laser at all, whether it be IR or visual. If you're not going to be planning on going inside somewhere, like some kind of building, or going inside some kind of, you know, I would even say trench warfare doesn't even require a laser in my opinion. But anywhere that you're going to be contained in an area where it's easier or it's quicker to deploy the laser than it is the red dot, is the only time where you're going to want to have that laser. Otherwise, take it off your gun. Even magnifiers. I'm a big magnifier like enthusiast. I love magnifier red dot combos. They increase the amount of capability you have. If you're not going to be shooting at that distance, take the freaking magnifier off your gun. It's extra weight. And like you said, ounces equal pounds. Like, live by that with every portion of your gear, and you will be just fine.
Pounds equal pain. And then we're going to go into the biggest mistake. This is generally the biggest mistake preppers make is ignoring physical fitness. If you are not, he laughs, but it's a very real thing that people ignore. You can have all the gear in the fucking world, you can have all the food, so on and so forth. But if you're some fat chud that can't walk 20 meters without getting short of breath and dizzy, you're gonna be not like you're not gonna be useful. I'm sorry. It sounds horrible to say, but you're not gonna be useful to your group, especially if you're in a leadership role or if you're in a bugging out role. People are going to look at you, they're going to look up to you, and if you're not a measured individual of discipline, taking care of yourself where you can. Now I understand disabilities and stuff exist, they do. But if there's nothing hampering you from being physically fit and you're not physically fit, that's going to look bad on you.
Yeah,
And at
and
the
that
end of the
doesn't also mean like being ridiculously ripped and taking all types of supplements and doing all of these like TikTok influencer workouts. Just fitness in a sense of like be able to lift weight over your head. The maximum amount of weight that you feel like you're going to come across, be able to lift over your head and plus some. Um, Even just endurance running, I feel like a lot of people skip out on that. Like everybody wants to joke about like don't skip leg day. Don't skip leg day. Even if it's just cardio and you're running, use your freaking legs. Know how far they can take you before you're gassed. Because I don't know how many times I've seen people like, we're doing a march or we're doing some kind of ruck in general, or even just any kind of traverse, and you're in kit, and they think that because they ran in these little booty shorts they bought off TikTok shop and some tank top that they're going to do the same thing in full kit with a rifle. You're not gonna. Train in kit and freaking run. If all you do is run in kit and maybe a little bit of bench press, you'll be a lot better off than a lot of people.
Yeah, and the big thing I would say as far as, the prepping spirit thing is calisthenics. Know how your body works, know the limits of your body, and know how to push your body beyond, just lifting weight. Endurance arguably is more important than strength
Yeah.
because if you are as strong as an ox, but again, you can't go up a hill because you get winded and get dizzy, you're not going to be very useful to the group or to yourself. So you want to make sure that you have that endurance and you have the actual physical means to carry out a bug out plan. Let's say you have a family member who's sick. If your bug out plan is just, we're going to take them with us and you don't give any rhyme or reason or you don't discuss further, how are we going to move and take care of this individual? You're screwing yourself and you're screwing them. And so physical fitness is, in my opinion, the most important part of preparedness.
Yeah,
As
definitely.
as one man once said, if you're not fit, you're gonna die.
Yeah, be fit or die.
Yeah, be fit or die. So a little bit of a recap here. When you should bug in. So if you're looking at bugging in, your home is structurally safe, so your home is not falling on your head. There's no immediate threat. There's not a fire, flood, or anything coming towards you. You have supplies. If you don't have supplies, bugging in is not going to be very helpful. You kind of screwed yourself anyway. But you want to be
If
where
you
your
don't have
supplies are.
supplies, honestly, just before you even listen to this podcast, go buy supplies.
Yeah, go buy food, water. The fucking even the illustrious government FEMA recommends you have a 3-day supply. They have a little brochure that you can follow. Just start there. Start there, move up. We'll talk a little bit in a later episode about where you should start as a prepper because you could definitely start on the wrong foot as a prepper, and then starting small and going up from there is the biggest thing. And then this is another one is that not every, we talk about SHTF, Doomsday, whatever, so on you. Not every scenario is going to be like that. You could your personal SHTF could be like, maybe there's a mass power outage. Maybe there's a mass internet outage. Maybe the highway's closed and you can't get to work. Something like that, is not going to necessitate you bugging out. It would look kind of weird if you take your rifle and go into the woods because gas went up $1, something like
Yeah.
that. So you want to make sure your response necessitates, or the situation necessitates your response to said situation. And then another big thing is if you can defend your position, like we talked about in the apartment, If it is more dangerous for you to stay, then leave. But if you are in a advantageous position, like with your housing, then yeah, stay. It is going to be, it's going to keep you alive longer, more often than not.
Definitely. Don't put yourself at more risk. That's genuinely where the bug in or bug out scenario comes from, is if it's more of a risk to stay, leave. If it's more of a risk to leave, stay.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you must bug out. So we're talking about things such as wildfires. Wildfires is a big one we see in the US, like in California. I am sorry, you're not going to fight a wildfire. You got to go. Or flooding. Flooding is a big one. Chemical hazards, if there's a chemical spill in your area, something like that. And then direct violence targeting your area. This is not so much I've had it. I watch it on the news. The riots and stuff like that, and the violence. This is not really something that we have in Alaska. It's not really a problem. But if there's violence in my area, targeting my area in my home, especially if it's an organized force or a larger force than I contend with, then either I stay in Alamo myself or I bug out and leave. I'm more inclined to bug
Yeah.
out because I have other people with me I need to support and protect. But if you want Alamo, that's your call. And then bugging out done right. We talked a lot about how people, fuck off into the woods and do it wrong, but how people do it right. So you want to have a pre planned destination. You want to have a place you are going. Like if you have a property with a cabin, that's a great idea. Then you have to figure out, okay, can you get there? If it requires a float plane to get there and you don't have a float plane, that's really going to hurt your efforts to actually get there.
Yeah.
And then another thing is you want to have multiple routes to get to your bug out location. Alaska has a very big problem with this because Alaska has very few roads. We have one major highway. And if that highway gets backed up, you're fucked, basically. Like in the town I live in, I can go north if the highway's backed up so far. I cannot go south at all. So you are going to be cut off from that area if you had to go south, if I had to go south, for example. So you want to have multiple routes. You want to have primary and backup routes to go to your location. And then another big thing is you want to have your gear staged and tested. You do not want to be testing something for the first time in a real world event. You want to test and you want to train
No.
with it. Train how you fight. If you have a plate carrier with plates in it that you've never worn before and shit's going down and that's your first time putting it on, you're going to have a bad time.
Dude, plate carrier fatigue is so real. So many people forget that.
Oh yeah. It feels like I imagine what it feels like taking off a bra when you take off your plate carrier after wearing it for 12 hours. Feels great.
Exactly.
And then we touched a little bit about this previously, but time matters. You want to leave early if you are going to go. You want to commit to leaving early if you can versus leaving later. Because generally speaking, the later it is, the more violent things are going to be, the more scarce resources are going to be, the more businesses are going to be closed or not even operating at all, or the more roads are going to be blocked. That's the big thing. Roads and highways are going to be blocked, especially as later time goes on and you won't have access. And if your bug out location is 400 miles away, do you really plan on walking that far?
Yeah.
So you definitely want to plan on leaving earlier rather than later. So when it comes to bugging in or bugging out, the truth is this is how you should treat it. Bugging in should be your primary plan for most people, unless you're like, in your apartment, you're in a violent area, so on and so forth. For the majority of people, for that suburban dad sitting in his home, bugging in should be your strategy. And then you should use bugging out as an emergency backup. So I want to thank everyone for coming to the podcast today. This is our first episode. That want to thank Bleach for being here. Thank you, Bleach, for your insight.
Anytime, man.
And then some other questions I have is questions for the viewer. That is that what is your bug out strategy? That you can tell us OPSEC, so on and so forth. How do you plan on approaching that situation? So, thank you guys for listening in. We will be doing more podcasts with Bleach here. Bleach is going to be my co host, and we're going to have some guests on for later episodes. If you have episode ideas, please let us know. Thank you guys for listening in. Hope you have a good day. Peace.